Hi there, this is Mark McRae, and I want you to think about this. The majority of millionaires in the world have somehow managed to do it through real estate. Maybe they've grown huge portfolios, or maybe it's one person or a couple who have bought one investment property or have flipped things. But on average, the number of people who become millionaires is done through property, and here's the caveat, the real billionaires do it through business. And I know that sounds a bit strange, but if you look at the Fortune 500 companies and the people behind them, they've done it through their businesses. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't invest in property. It's a good thing. I invest in property. I have a property portfolio, but business is where I believe that the average person who doesn't have the resources to try and put together something for a property deal can probably do it through business. So if I was talking to my son, for example, or my daughter, and they had very little capital, which they do, but I encourage them to start businesses, because business is a thing that you can pull together resources, you can pull together people, you can get things going for you can do it cheaply, right? You can almost do it for nothing with a good idea and some sweat equity. So if I was given a choice of, let's say I had a 10-year run. I had a 10-year runway in front of me, and that was the time period that I had, and the goal was to make as much money as humanly possible. I would choose a business because on average, that business is going to give a higher return, a higher yield than property would. So the way I like to think about it is that, I invest in businesses, grow the businesses, and move the money over to more passive type incomes. There's no such thing as a truly passive income, but property is pretty passive. And then that way I call it belts and braces. You've got that money generating machine that rolls over to something that doesn't require as much time or brain power. If you have 3 or 4 or 5, however many properties you have, you still, those leases come up. There are issues. The person who's handling the properties want to talk to you. So there's no such thing as I bought this thing and it just kicks out money every month and I don't even look at it. Because if you're not looking at it, somebody's probably screwing you. You should always keep an eye on your investments. There's no excuse none at all, for losing money through ignorance. If you have money and you've got it invested in something, take the time to at least have a look at it once a month and make sure everything's okay. Don't look at it once a year and say, yep, it's all good. Things happen. Regulations happen, so you should always be on top of that. There was a man I was working with years ago who had a fairly reasonable portfolio, and he had about £500,000, and this is going back about 20 years ago, so it was quite a lot of money then. And we were working together, and there was a strategy that he wanted to try and execute in a new business, and it seemed logical that from what we were discussing and what he had available, that he would have to cash in this portfolio in order to make that happen. So the first red flag was, I said to him, let's just figure out how much you've actually got there. So he called them up and they were avoiding them. They wouldn't return the calls. And then, he did eventually get a hold of them. They said, we don't have the number right now, but, the investment is a risk. So to cut a long story short, after hounding them, that 500,000 investment had depleted over the course of 5 years to £50,000, not dollars. So from £500,000, his investment had dropped to £50,000. And the guys who were in charge of it were basically doing what they want because they were aware that there was nobody home. There was nobody looking after it or questioning them. Maybe it would have happened anyway, but, if he at least was aware that there should be some communication on a regular basis to see the value of your portfolio, then it would have made a difference. Having said that, still, I believe that in the highest return you're going to get is with a business. And I'm talking really abstract numbers here. But a little small business that maybe employs 10 people and does $2 or $3 million turnover a year will probably make about 30% a year if it's run well, it's in the right niche and doing the right thing. And I know there's a lot of different parameters in there that we haven't spoken about. But when I buy a business, that's what I'm looking for, is that it has the potential to repay itself in 3 years, just over 30% a year return. So that's what I would expect to make if I was holding a business. If I was holding good quality AAA properties, I wouldn't expect to make that. In the Australian residential market where I'm invested, my yield is somewhere between 5 and 6%, and that's good in this market. It's changing slightly because of the interest rates, but it's not 30% a year. It's not 20% a year. It's more long-term, and you have kind of two bites at the cherry. You have growth, so that you have the growth of the property occasionally, and the yield of the property, the money that comes in from the property. So that's just some thoughts for today. Given the chance or given the opportunity, and I had a reasonably long runway, but not that long, I would probably opt for a business. My first instinct is to do business because it's so adaptable, and it can be a lot cheaper to start than investing in property. Anyway, guys, if you like this sort of conversation, don't forget to give me some feedback, give me a like, leave some comments. Thanks for listening.